3 months had passed since the night I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. 3 months since everything changed. And yet, from the outside, nothing had changed at all. I was still the president, still the soldier who had risen through fire and blood, still the man the world called a revolutionary, the one who challenged foreign powers, who promised dignity to a wounded nation, who carried the fate of millions in his decisions. Every morning, I put on the same uniform. Every day, I sat in the same meetings, signed the same documents, commanded the same troops. Every night, I studied maps, intelligence reports, and the fragile lines separating order from chaos. But inside me lived another reality, a hidden one. Only a handful of people knew, 2 trusted advisors, 1 lifelong friend, and a quiet Christian pastor who visited me in secret. To everyone else, I remained what they expected. A Muslim by culture, a neutral figure in matters of faith, a symbol meant to belong equally to all. That was the mask I wore, not because I was ashamed of Christ, not because I doubted him, but because I was afraid of what the truth might do to my country. Burkina Faso is a fragile tapestry. Muslims form the majority. Christians live beside them. Ancient traditional beliefs still breathe through villages and bloodlines. Peace here is not loud, it is delicate. It survives through balance, restraint, silence. And I was a man who had seized power with a promise: to unite, to protect, to resist neocolonial chains, to give my people back their dignity. A public declaration of Christian faith from a military president could shatter that balance. My advisors had not softened their words. Your faith is your right, they said. But your position is not your own. You represent everyone. One careless step could divide the nation. They were not wrong. My name alone, Ibrahim, carried expectations. In West Africa, it whispered Islam before I ever spoke. I had grown up in a Muslim household, though not a strict one. We prayed when we remembered. We fasted when circumstances allowed. Faith was tradition, rhythm, identity, but never fire in the soul. Until the night, everything broke. Until the night, God answered a question I had never dared to ask. And since then, I had lived as 2 men. The president the world could see, and the follower of Christ the world could not. The attack came at dawn. By noon, the numbers were already unbearable. Dozens dead, more wounded. A marketplace turned into ash and blood. Children pulled from rubble with dust in their mouths and terror frozen in their eyes. Mothers screaming names that would never be answered. I stood in the operations room, listening to reports delivered in the flat, professional tone soldiers used to survive horror. Coordinates, casualty estimates, enemy movement, words without tears. When the meeting ended, my generals saluted and left. My advisors followed. The doors closed, and for the first time that day, I was alone. The silence was violent. I walked to the window of my office. The capital stretched beneath me, alive, noisy, unaware that in another corner of the country, families were already burying their future. My hands were trembling. I had ordered operations before. I had seen death before. I had accepted that leadership meant choosing who might live and who might not. But that day, something inside me finally cracked. "What more do you want from me?" I whispered into the empty room. No cameras, no aides, no nation watching, just a man standing before the weight of evil. I fight, I negotiate, I sacrifice, I carry this country on my back, and still they die. My voice broke. "Where are you?" I did not say Allah. I did not say Jesus. I said what desperate men say when they have no theology left. "God, whoever you are." My knees touched the floor. For the first time since becoming president, I did not kneel before a flag, or a constitution, or history. I knelt as a human being. "If you exist," I said, my forehead against the cold marble, "then answer me. Tell me why children are slaughtered. Tell me why my power means nothing against hatred. Tell me why this world is built on graves." I expected silence. Instead, I felt it. Not a voice, not a vision, a presence. It filled the room like light without brightness, like warmth without heat. The air itself seemed to breathe. And somehow, without anyone explaining it to me, I knew Jesus. Not the name from Western churches, not the symbol on old colonial buildings, but a living reality, a truth that did not argue. It simply was. And in that presence, I understood three things at once: that God had not abandoned the world, that evil was real, but not sovereign, and that I was standing before the one who had chosen to suffer with humanity, not rule above it. Tears came without warning. "I cannot carry this alone," I said. The words were barely sound, and in the deepest part of my soul, an answer formed, not in sentences, but in certainty. "You were never meant to." I did not debate. I did not negotiate. I did not ask for proof. That night, power meant nothing to me. Revolution meant nothing. Rank meant nothing. I was only a man who needed saving. "If you are truly the way," I whispered, "then take my life. I give it to you. I don't know how to be strong anymore." The room did not change, but I did. Something heavy loosened its grip on my chest. The fear that had lived behind my ribs for years, fear of failure, fear of betrayal, fear of being forgotten, began to dissolve. I remained on the floor for a long time. When I finally stood, I was still president, still responsible, still surrounded by enemies, but I was no longer alone. And I knew, with a certainty deeper than politics, deeper than ideology, my life no longer belonged to me. After that night, nothing changed, and everything did. By morning, I was once again the president. Briefings at 7 o'clock, security updates at 8 o'clock, meetings without end. The machinery of the state did not pause for spiritual revolutions, but inside me, a quiet fire had been lit. I began to read the Bible in the late hours, when the palace slept, and even my guards outside the door spoke in whispers. At first, I read cautiously, as if touching something forbidden, then hungrily, then desperately. The words felt alive, uncomfortable, gentle and violent at the same time. I found myself praying without ceremony, before signing orders, before approving operations, before speaking to foreign leaders, not aloud, in silence. "Guide me, keep me from becoming what I hate. Do not let power rot my soul." Through a discreet network of contacts, I was introduced to a Christian pastor, an older man with tired eyes and a voice that carried no ambition. We met in safe locations, never twice in the same place. To him, I was not Mr. President. I was simply a man learning how to walk again. He taught me about grace, about surrender, about the strange freedom of admitting weakness, and eventually, he spoke the word I had been avoiding: baptism. He explained it gently, not as a ritual of politics, but as a declaration of belonging, a death to the old self, a beginning. I nodded, and then I delayed. "There is a war," I said. "There are fragile alliances. There are people who would use this against the nation." He did not argue. He only looked at me with the patience of someone who knows fear by its real name. Weeks passed. My faith grew stronger. My courage did not. Each time I imagined standing in water before witnesses, my mind filled with consequences, headlines, protests, whispers of betrayal, accusations of Western influence, cracks in the military, fire in the streets. I told myself I was being wise, responsible, strategic. But late at night, when no one could hear me, another word visited my thoughts: cowardice. I was brave enough to face armies, not brave enough to face truth. I led men into battle openly, but followed Christ in hiding. 2 lives, 1 body, 1 growing fracture, and the fracture was beginning to bleed. The dream came without warning, not after prayer, not after scripture, not after confession. It came on an ordinary night, heavy with reports and unfinished decisions. I had fallen asleep still wearing the fatigue of command, and then I was no longer in my room. I stood barefoot beside a river. The air was warm, clean, alive. Water moved over stone with a sound that seemed older than language. Sunlight rested gently on my skin, not burning, not fading, simply present. I looked down. No uniform, no medals, no insignia. Only white cloth, simple and light, moving with the wind. Before I could question it, I sensed someone behind me. Footsteps. I turned. He was walking toward me along the riverbank. Nothing about him was loud, nothing theatrical, and yet the world itself seemed to step aside to make room for him. Dark hair, Middle Eastern face, clothes as simple as mine, but his eyes, they were unbearable. Not in brightness, in depth. They held sorrow and joy together, justice and mercy, eternity folded into a human gaze. My knees touched the ground before my mind could form the command. Lord, the word escaped me like breath from a wounded chest. He smiled, and the universe felt less heavy. Stand, Ibrahim, he said, not as an order, as an invitation. I rose, shaking. He gestured toward the river, and we began to walk. For a while, neither of us spoke. Only the water spoke, endlessly moving forward. Then he said, "Tell me who you are." I answered without thinking. "I am the president of my country." A nod. "I am a soldier." Another nod. "I am responsible for millions of lives." He stopped walking, turned to me. "And if all of that were taken away," he asked quietly, "who would remain?" The question struck deeper than any accusation. I searched for something solid. "I am a son of my land, a revolutionary, a man who wants justice." "All true," he said, "but still incomplete." He stepped closer. "Who are you to me?" The river seemed to pause its breath. "I am..." My voice faltered. "I am the one you saved." His eyes softened. "Yes." Then gently, "You are my son." Not metaphor, not poetry, identity. Everything else, power, rank, history, collapsed into something small and temporary. He placed his hands on my shoulders. "I did not place you in leadership by accident. I did not raise you through chaos for decoration. But you cannot fulfill what I intend while living divided. I felt the truth of it in my bones." "You are trying to serve two identities," he said, "one public, one hidden, but I do not dwell in compartments." Fear rose in me like a tide. "You know what will happen if I speak," I said. "You know what they will say." "Yes," he replied. "And you know what will happen if you don't." The river continued flowing. So did time, so did my heart, toward a choice I could no longer escape. We continued walking. The river widened, calm and deep, reflecting a sky without borders. "You fear the consequences," he said. I did not deny it. "My country is fragile," I answered. "Faith here is not only belief, it is history, identity, wounds. If I speak, some will feel betrayed. Others will feel threatened. My enemies will sharpen this into a weapon." He listened as one who already knew every word. "You trust me to guide your decisions," he said. "You pray before battles, before negotiations, before sentences that send men to their deaths." "Yes." "You trust my wisdom with the fate of your nation," he continued, "but not with your name." The words were gentle. They cut anyway. "You want my power," he said, "but not my visibility." I felt exposed, not judged, but understood. "I am trying to protect them," I said, "my people." "And I am trying to free you," he replied. He bent, picked up a stone, and threw it into the river. The ripples spread, touching everything. "You believe silence preserves peace," he said, "but silence also teaches." "What does my silence teach?" I asked. "That faith is something to hide. That truth is negotiable. That courage has limits." I closed my eyes. He went on. "You stand publicly against empires, against armies, against systems older than you. You challenge powerful nations without trembling. But you tremble before water." I laughed once, short, broken. "When you confronted injustice," he said, "you accepted sanctions, isolation, threats. You called it necessary. Now I ask you to stand for truth. Is that too dangerous?" The river whispered beside us. "I am not asking you to build a theocracy," he said. "I am not asking you to rule in my name. I am asking you not to deny me with your silence." He stopped near the water's edge. "This is where fear ends," he said. I knew what he meant. "And if it destroys what I've built?" I asked. He looked at me not as a king, not as a judge, but as one soldier to another. Then it was never truly secure. I felt the final wall inside me crack. My voice was quiet. "What do you want me to do?" "Be baptized," he said, "not as a symbol of power, but as a confession of belonging. The river waited. So did heaven. So did my soul. And in that stillness, fear finally lost its throne. He stepped into the water first. The river welcomed him without resistance, rising to his waist as if it recognized its creator. He turned back toward me and extended his hand. Come. I hesitated, not because I doubted him, but because I knew that once I moved forward, something in me would die, and I had lived as that man for many years. I placed my hand in his. It was warm, solid, real. I stepped into the river. The water was cool, clear, alive against my skin. It reached my chest as I stood beside him, the current gentle but unstoppable. This is what you have been avoiding, he said. Not water. Death. He placed one hand on my back. The other rose, not toward the sky, but toward eternity itself. This is the end of the man who hides, he said. And then he guided me backward. The world disappeared. Water closed over my face. Sound vanished. Light shattered. For one suspended moment, I felt everything I had carried dissolve. The hunger for control, the addiction to approval, the armor of titles, the loneliness of command. They sank away from me like rust from iron. Then he lifted me. Air returned. Light returned. The river sang again. But I did not return as the same man. My chest burned with breath. My heart felt unburdened, like a fortress that had finally laid down its weapons. You are free, he said, not from responsibility, but from fear. Water streamed from my clothes, from my hands, from my face, and I realized something terrifying and beautiful. If I could stand here, exposed before God, I could stand exposed before men. I will do it, I said. My voice was steady. I will stop hiding. I will be baptized. Not in dreams, but in the world. His face lit with a joy that made every revolution I had ever led feel small. I will be with you, he said, in every headline, in every accusation, in every threat, in every lonely night. He embraced me, not as a ruler embraces a subject, but as a father holds a son who has chosen the harder road. I woke before dawn. My body was in the presidential residence, but my soul was still standing in the river. My heart was racing. My clothes were dry. The room was silent, except for the distant footsteps of guards changing shifts in the corridor, yet I could still feel the water, still feel his hand, still hear his voice. I rose from the bed and walked to the window. The Capitol lay in darkness, scattered with small islands of light, fragile and breathing. Somewhere beyond those lights were villages I had never visited, families I would never meet, graves I would never see. All of them trusted a man who did not yet exist, the man I had been pretending to be. I knelt, not as a president, not as a commander, as a son who had been called by name. I will obey, I whispered. The words did not tremble. Later that morning, after briefings and formalities, and the machinery of authority had taken its first breath of the day, I left under discreet security and met the pastor. We sat across from each other in a modest room with cracked walls and a single wooden table between us. He noticed my face immediately. You saw him, he said quietly. I nodded. Then I told him everything. The river, the questions, the command, the water, the promise. When I finished, he did not speak for a long time. Then his eyes filled. I have prayed for this courage, he said, not for your position, for your soul. I'm ready, I said. He exhaled slowly. Then we must be wise, he replied, and we must be honest. We will not turn this into spectacle. We will not hide it either. The decision was made, not in public, not yet, but in a room where no flags hung and no power could interfere, only truth. Preparation does not quiet fear, it gives fear a calendar. In the days that followed, plans were made in low voices and encrypted messages. A small church was chosen, a Sunday morning service, no cameras invited, no announcement beforehand, only a simple gathering of believers and a door left unlocked for the world to discover later. It was restraint, not secrecy, wisdom, not denial. Still, as the day approached, sleep became an enemy. On the final night, I lay awake in the darkness of the presidential residence, listening to the soft rhythm of a nation breathing beyond the walls. I thought of my mother, of her hands raised in familiar prayers, of her faith, inherited and unquestioned. I imagined her hearing the news from strangers before she heard it from me. I thought of my father, silent and proud, who had taught me that a man survives by never showing where he can be wounded. Tomorrow, I would show the deepest wound of all. I thought of generals who trusted me with their lives, of soldiers who would die at my command before the year ended, of allies who would recalculate loyalty the moment belief entered the equation. I thought of enemies. They would not need to invent new lies. The truth would be enough. For a moment, I almost reached for the old refuge. Delay. Another month, another crisis, another excuse dressed as responsibility. But the river returned to me, the weight leaving my chest. The words, "This is where fear ends." I sat up in bed. If obedience required courage, then delay required dishonesty. I chose the heavier road. Before dawn, I wrote letters, not speeches. Letters. To my parents, to my closest advisors, to myself. I did not defend. I did not justify. I simply told the truth, who I was, who I had become, and whose I was now. When the sun rose, it found a man who had already crossed the hardest border, the one inside. The church was small, concrete walls, wooden benches worn smooth by decades of prayer, open windows letting in dust, sunlight, and the distant sound of motorcycles starting their day. No flags, no soldiers inside, no symbols of authority, only people. Men and women who worked ordinary jobs, mothers with children on their backs, old men whose faith had survived governments and coups, young faces that still believed tomorrow could be kinder than yesterday. When I entered, a quiet shock passed through the room. Not applause, not chaos. A sudden stillness, like wind pausing before changing direction. I was not in uniform. I wore plain white. For the first time in years, no rank protected me. I sat among them, not above, not apart, with them. The service began. Songs rose in languages older than the borders of our country. Voices cracked, hands lifted. Tears came freely, without embarrassment. No one mentioned my title, no one needed to. When the pastor stood, his voice did not thunder. It trembled. He spoke of water, of death that is not an ending, of courage that does not carry weapons. Then he called my name, not my office, my name. I stood. My legs felt heavier than they ever had on a battlefield. I stepped forward. The baptismal pool waited. Clear water, still. The same river in another form. The pastor asked quietly, "Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God?" "I do." "Do you believe he died and rose for you?" "I do." "Will you follow him, whatever it costs?" I did not hesitate. Yes. I stepped into the water. It closed around my legs, my waist, my chest. The room held its breath. "I baptize you," he said, "in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." He lowered me. For a moment, the world disappeared again, not into secrecy, into truth. Then I rose. Water streamed down my face, the ceiling blurred, the room erupted, not with politics, not with slogans, but with joy. Hands reached toward me, voices sang, someone wept openly. And I stood there, soaked and unarmored, feeling lighter than I had ever felt as a free man. Not because I was powerful, but because I was no longer divided. The news did not wait for permission. It moved faster than any statement, faster than any strategy. By afternoon, it was already everywhere. On radios and market stalls, on phones in crowded buses, in military barracks, in foreign embassies. The president has been baptized. Some said it with wonder, some with anger, some with disbelief. By evening, international media had found the story. Analysts spoke in calm voices about stability, risk, regional implications, as if faith were a new kind of weapon. In the palace, my advisors stood around a long table, speaking all at once. This will be framed as foreign influence. The opposition is preparing statements. Some imams are demanding clarification. Social media is dividing already. I listened. The old version of me would have calculated, controlled, hidden behind neutral language. Instead, I asked for a single sheet of paper. I wrote my own words. No consultants, no filters. That night, I addressed the nation, not in uniform, not from a parade ground, from a simple room with one camera. My fellow citizens, I said, today many of you learned something about me that I did not plan to announce through rumors. I am a Christian. The sentence fell into the world like a stone into deep water. This is not a political strategy. It is not a foreign order. It is not a rejection of my past or my people. It is a truth about my heart. I spoke of respect, of Muslims who prayed with sincerity, of Christians who suffered quietly, of traditions older than the state itself. I will not govern for one religion, I said. I will govern for one people. But I will no longer pretend to be someone I am not. My faith teaches me to serve, not dominate, to protect life, not exploit it, to seek justice, not revenge. These values do not weaken my leadership. They define it. The reaction was immediate. Applause in some streets, protests in others, praise, condemnation, threats, support, silence, noise, all at once. That night, I slept less than I ever had before, but I slept without hiding. And for the first time since taking office, I knew. Whatever storms would come, I would meet them as one man, not two. The storm did not pass quickly. It circled. Some members of parliament accused me of betraying tradition. A few officers requested transfers. Foreign diplomats asked careful questions, dressed as friendly concern. There were demonstrations in 2 cities. There were also prayers in hundreds of homes. For weeks, every decision I made was interpreted through a new lens. If I spoke of justice, they said it was religion. If I spoke of unity, they said it was strategy. If I spoke of peace, they said it was weakness. I learned something painful and simple. Once you reveal your soul, people will use it to judge your hands. But something else happened too, quietly, unexpectedly. A Muslim colonel who had fought beside me for years came to my office one evening. He stood stiffly, as soldiers do, then removed his cap. "I do not share your faith," he said, "but I respect a man who does not lie about who he is." A woman wrote to me from the north where violence had taken her husband. "I don't care what religion you follow," she wrote. "I care that you look tired when you speak about our dead. It means you have not become stone." Young people began sending messages, not about Christianity, not about Islam, but about courage. How do you stand when everyone is watching? How do you choose truth when it is dangerous? I never answered with theology. I answered with honesty. Some nights, fear still visited me. Some mornings, doubt sat at the edge of my bed. But something had changed permanently. I no longer had to protect a lie. I prayed openly now, not in speeches, in silence, before decisions, before funerals, before sending soldiers into darkness. I did not become perfect. I did not become holy. I became whole. And in a life shaped by coups, weapons, borders, and broken promises, that was the rarest victory of all. I am still the president, still a soldier, still responsible for more than one man should ever be. But before all of that, I am no longer hidden. I am no longer divided. I am no longer pretending. I am simply a man who chose truth when silence was safer. And that choice changed the way I carry power, not like a crown, but like a burden shared with God.